Greetings, viewers, in the precious name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. This is Paul Sandhu from ScienceOfTheEnd.net with a special update titled "The Sun Sets Upon Japan." I think this picture here just describes what this update is about. It's from a town in Fukushima, and their town logo is new nuclear energy, our hometown's future. Well, I suppose, tragically that town has no future left anymore because of nuclear energy. So this special update on Japan consists of recent news reports, written and visual, that confirm the fact that the situation in Japan is far worse than is being reported even today. Since radioactivity cannot be contained or limited to a particular area or region, it stands to reason that this problem is not merely a Japanese problem or a TEPCO problem, but rather a global problem. Why, therefore, have not the major nations of the world, USA, Russia, China, UK, France, Germany, and India, all of which are heavily involved in the nuclear industry, rushed to Japan and tried to resolve this problem? Why was entombment of the whole complex not undertaken immediately as it was in Chernobyl? Are the powers that be that stupid that they will risk contaminating most of the world, especially the Northern Hemisphere, or is there another agenda at play here? The response of Japan to this crisis and of the world's leading nations has been subdued at best and downright criminal at worst. The Koreans and Chinese have even accused the Japanese of being incompetent in the handling of this calamity. The sun has indeed set on the land of the rising sun. I don't see how it is possible that most of Japan will not end up being a ghost town like many towns in Fukushima already are. Will we be seeing the abandonment of Tokyo? As this catastrophe keeps getting bigger and bigger, such questions will be asked in earnest, especially by the Japanese. I fear that the sun will not rise on Japan for much longer. This is a video report from Russia Today TV, and essentially it tells us that although the authorities knew right from the beginning that this was a much more serious problem than they were reporting, they did not want to alarm the people, so they rather let them be radiated than tell them that how bad things really were. So please give it a listen. Oh, excuse me. I have to go back there. Okay, here we go. It should be.
Japan has upgraded the severity rating at the paralyzed Fukushima nuclear plant to 7, a level only ever previously assigned to the Chernobyl disaster. Officials say it's been raised because high radiation has been recorded in the air, ocean and tap water. But Japan's Nuclear Safety Agency is still reluctant to compare the dangers to what happened at Chernobyl, saying the radiation leak is still smaller. Well, earlier, a powerful aftershock shook eastern Japan. It came exactly a month after a devastating earthquake and tsunami hit the country, killing more than 13,000 people. Robert Jacobs from the Hiroshima Peace Institute believes the authorities have been keeping the official severity rating at Fukushima lower to avoid panic.
The danger is extremely severe right now, and one of the problems is that the level of danger and severity is still uncertain and unknown. You still have 3 plants with the cores in partial meltdown. You have a 4th plant with the spent fuel pond giving off quite a bit of radiation, and at this point there is no clear path towards resolving and ending this situation. So it's remains extremely dangerous because we could end up with a complete meltdown of several of the reactors, or we could end up with just an ongoing release of radiation for a few months. That would be the good scenario at this point. I think that from the start, the Japanese government has been very conscious of trying to make it appear as though this incident is smaller than Chernobyl. They've kept the evacuation zone to that smaller than that of Chernobyl. They tried to keep the number lower than that of Chernobyl, and I think that had largely to do with public perceptions. But ultimately, because the situation was not controllable and events forced the world to to see quite obviously that a lot of radiation was entering the environment. So the Japanese government was no longer able to contain this with public relations efforts. I believe that it's entirely public relations reasons that did not raise the level. I think that when they raised the level to a 5, which is equivalent of the 3 Mile Island accident in the United States, it was clearly already at a 7. But by the time they even raised it to 5, there was an extremely large entrance of radiation into the environment at Fukushima.
So you see, these people, an overreaction in this situation would be much more preferred to an underreaction, that that the evacuation zone should have been much bigger, and people should have been given warning. But of course, that's not the usual response from anybody in authority under these circumstances, as was proven in 3 Mile Island as well as in Chernobyl. This next report is about the number 4 reactor, which is really a very dangerous situation, as another report in this series will prove. And this is telling us that it is an uncontrolled fusion process that is taking place. They're spewing radiation into the air constantly through this number 4 reactor.
The Tokyo Electric Power Company says it has detected higher than normal levels of radioactive substances in the water of the spent fuel storage pool at the number 4 reactor of the crippled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. TEPCO says the levels suggest that some of the spent fuel has been damaged, but most of it has not. TEPCO measured the water temperature in the spent fuel storage pool on Tuesday using an extending arm on a special vehicle. It found that the temperature had risen to about 90 degrees Celsius. That's more than 50 degrees higher than the normal level. The company sprayed water to cool the fuel. It also analyzed samples taken from the pool water to determine whether the fuel has been damaged. TEPCO said on Wednesday that it found 220 becquerels of iodine-131 per cubic centimeter of water, as well as 88 becquerels of cesium-134 and 93 becquerels of cesium-137. The firm says the radioactive materials are usually produced by nuclear fission.
The levels of radioactive substances in the storage pool are higher than those under normal circumstances. However, the figures themselves are not so high. Some of the fuel in the storage pool is likely to have been damaged, but the measured levels suggest that most of the fuel is undamaged. We will conduct a more detailed examination.
On Tuesday, high levels of radiation measuring 84 millisieverts per hour were detected above the water surface of the storage pool. TEPCO says it will examine the relationship between the high radiation and radioactive substances, and also try to find out if there are any other factors that could have raised the radiation level above the water's surface.
See, it is the response of governments all over the world that is very, very frustrating for everyone, because nobody really knows what the real radiation readings are and what kind of particles are being detected and where they are being detected. In this report here, this is by a gentleman named Arne Gundersen, who is a nuclear engineer, and he is tells us exactly what is transpiring there in Fukushima at the present time.
Maximum level that's been rated at. Talk to nuclear engineer Arnold Gundersen. He's in Vermont in the US. Mr. Gundersen, thanks for being on RT. You've described yourself before this, the Fukushima disaster, as Chernobyl on steroids. Now, how worried should the world be that this disaster is now officially rated as highly as what we saw in Ukraine 25 years ago?
Well, the sad thing is that it should have been recognized 3.5 weeks ago, and more people should have been evacuated out sooner. I think it is an indication now that the Japanese, both the TEPCO and the government, understand how severe the accident is, but it's really 3 weeks too late.
So why has it taken so long? Why has it taken the government this long to put this official status on it now, if you like? It's already jumped up once before, hasn't it?
I think, there's a lot of things here. The Japanese are really committed to nuclear, and so there was a lot of vested interest that wanted to downplay it. I studied the 3 Mile Island accident, and I studied Chernobyl, and now this one, and it's pretty standard practice that when things are breaking, you seem to look for the best alternative as opposed to the most realistic one. And I think the Japanese wanted a nice outcome and believed whatever instruments gave them that indication.
So what are we looking at here? I mean, taking what you said earlier on about the, the comment you made about Chernobyl on steroids, I mean, are we likely to see huge areas of wasteland around the Fukushima plant that no one's going to be able to inhabit for decades? I mean, Japan's a very densely populated country. It's going to have a huge impact if that's the case, isn't it?
Well, the luck, if there's any luck here, and really there isn't, but if there's any luck here, it's been that most of the time the wind has been going out to sea. Had the wind been going the other way, I think we'd see that scenario you just described already. The worst case is the Unit 4 fuel pool, which is has enormous amounts of plutonium and depleted uranium, like you had in the last segment. If that catches fire, it could devastate a large area.
Fire this far down now? They've got power back to that plant. Is there a danger that that could still happen then? Are things still very not in control there, as you see it?
Yeah, they don't have power to the fuel pool cooling systems at any of the reactors, and Unit 4 is the worst because that fuel pool has the freshest fuel. It's the most physically hot. And in addition, Unit 4's got a crack in the side of it. So even if they had water to cool it, it's going to run out the crack. That's the toughest problem on site right now.
And what's your view over who was the best person to deal with this initially and as the weeks have gone by? Should it have been TEPCO? After all, I guess they are the people that know all about it. But there again, they, I guess, want to look at their profits as well, don't they? And they want the best outcome for their company. Should the government maybe have done more and stepped in and diverted more central resources? I mean, it's easy for us to sit here and say that now, but of course, Japan was in a heck of a state at the time.
Yeah, it's hard to second guess in an emergency, but again, I think that you're right. They had a tsunami to worry about too, but the government should have stepped in sooner, more aggressively. You know, the data we were getting out of TEPCO was not good. You know, wrong numbers kept coming out for weeks, and it's hard to make good decisions when you have bad data.
Well, Arnold Gunderson, thanks for being on the programme. Nuclear engineer, as you are, talking to us from Vermont in the US there. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, in this last report, this is a gentleman, another nuclear scientist. His name is Michio Kaku, and he discusses the implications of what's going on there.
Now it's great to see you again.
Glad to be on the show, Amy.
So, talk about this raising of the category level to 7 on a par with Chernobyl.
Well, Tokyo Electric has been in denial, trying to downplay the full impact of this nuclear accident. However, there's a formula, a mathematical formula by which you can determine what level this accident is. This accident has already released something on the order of 50,000 trillion becquerels of radiation. You do the math. That puts it right smack in the middle of a level 7 nuclear accident. Still less than Chernobyl. However, radiation is continuing to leak out of the reactors. The situation is not stable at all. So you're looking at basically a ticking time bomb. It appears stable, but the slightest disturbance, a secondary earthquake, a pipe break, evacuation of the crew at Fukushima could set off a full-scale meltdown at 3 nuclear power stations, far beyond what we saw at Chernobyl.
Talk about exactly, I mean, as a physicist, to explain to people exactly what has taken place in Japan at these nuclear power plants.
Think of driving a car, and the car all of a sudden lunges out of control. You hit the brakes don't work. That's because the earthquake wiped out the safety systems in the first minute of the earthquake and tsunami. Then your radiator starts to heat up and explodes. That's the hydrogen gas explosion. And then to make it worse, the gas tank is heating up, and all of a sudden your whole car is going to be in flames. That's the full-scale meltdown. So what do? You drive the car into a river. That's what the utility did by putting seawater from the Pacific Ocean in a desperate attempt to keep water on top of the core. But then seawater has salt in it, and that gums up your radiator. And so what do? You call out the local firemen. And so now you have these Japanese samurai warriors. They know that this is potentially a suicide mission. They're coming in with hose water, trying to keep water over the melted nuclear reactor cores. So that's the situation now. So when the utility says that things are stable, it's only stable in the sense that you're dangling from a cliff
hanging by your fingernails, and as the time goes by, each fingernail starts to crack.
Thank you for listening. This is Paul Sandhu. I'll be back with another update soon.